Part 1. Sign the papers, Evelyn, or we'll have you committed by morning, Richard sneered, slamming his heavy fist onto the mahogany dining table. I didn't blink. I simply reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the cool, ridged edge of my silver Combat Medic Challenge coin. But what happened next would change everything. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. 3 months earlier, the air in Virginia was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a stark contrast to the dry, sterile dust of the Horn of Africa. I was Captain Evelyn Vance, a trauma surgeon and combat nurse with 2 tours under my belt. My hands, which had held shattered limbs together in the back of vibrating Black Hawk helicopters, now trembled slightly as I gripped the steering wheel of my SUV. I was returning home. I had survived mortar fire, improvised explosive devices, and the crushing weight of losing patients under my watch. Yet, as I pulled up the long, winding driveway of Oak Ridge Estate, a cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Oak Ridge had belonged to my father, Colonel Arthur Vance. When he passed away, he left the historic estate and a substantial trust fund to me and my biological grandmother, Nana Beatrice. But I had been deployed for the last 18 months. In my absence, my husband, Richard, had insisted on moving into the estate to maintain it. Along with him came my stepmother, Eleanor, and her 30-year-old daughter, Victoria. They were the remnants of my father's brief, ill-advised second marriage. They were people who wore expensive clothes like armor, but possessed the moral depth of a shallow puddle. When I stepped through the grand oak double doors, the silence of the house was suffocating. The air smelled of expensive floor wax, stale red wine, and a suffocatingly sweet, synthetic jasmine perfume that I knew didn't belong to me. Evelyn, you're back early, Richard said, stepping out of the study. He didn't rush to hug me. He stood at a distance, his eyes scanning me not with the warmth of a husband, but with the cold, calculating assessment of a customs official inspecting damaged cargo. He had lost weight, his hair slicked back, wearing a silk robe that had belonged to my father. The transport arrived ahead of schedule, I said, my voice flat, trained by years of military discipline to conceal exhaustion. Where is Lily? She's with the nanny, Richard replied quickly, waving a hand dismissively. You look exhausted, darling. The war has really taken a toll on you. Your eyes. You look highly unstable. It was a strange word to use. Unstable. Over the next few weeks, that word became a recurring theme. It was whispered in the hallways, dropped like a slow-acting poison into casual conversations. If he dropped a fork at dinner, Eleanor would sigh dramatically and exchange a worried glance with Richard. The trauma, Eleanor would whisper loud enough for me to hear. The poor girl has shell shock. We must be gentle with her. Her mind isn't what it used to be. Victoria, who had never held a job in her life and lived off the allowance Richard quietly funneled to her from our joint accounts, would look at me with mock pity. Maybe you shouldn't be alone with Lily, Evelyn. You have that look in your eyes. The one the soldiers get before they lose control. I kept my tongue. In the military, you learn to observe before you strike. You map the terrain, identify the enemy's strongholds, and calculate the wind speed before you take the shot. I noticed the small things. The way my father's silver pocket watch was missing from his desk. The way Nana Beatrice, who had suffered a debilitating stroke a year ago and was now wheelchair-bound and mute, would look at me with terror in her eyes whenever Eleanor entered the room. Nana Beatrice was my silent witness. She couldn't speak, but her mind was still a steel trap. Whenever I sat with her, holding her frail, spotted hand, her fingers would twitch, tapping out a frantic, irregular rhythm against my palm. She was trying to tell me something, but the heavy medication Eleanor administered to her kept her perpetually groggy, her eyes clouded by a chemically induced fog. The tension in the house escalated like a fever in an infected wound. I began to notice discrepancies in the financial ledgers of the Gold Star Legacy Foundation, a charity I had founded in my father's honor to assist the families of fallen service members. Richard was the treasurer. When I asked him for the quarterly audit reports, his face flushed a deep, angry crimson. "Are you questioning my integrity, Evelyn?" he hissed, his voice dropping an octave. "After everything I've sacrificed to keep this family together while you were playing hero in the sand, you're paranoid. It's the PTSD. I'm going to consult with a specialist. We can't have you running around making wild accusations." I didn't argue. I simply walked away, the silver combat medic coin heavy in my pocket. I knew the signs of a cover-up. The breaking point arrived on a stormy Thursday evening. I was scheduled to work a double shift at the military hospital 40 miles away. The rain was coming down in sheets, clawing at the windshield of my car as I drove out of the estate. Gates. But 10 miles down the road, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the hospital's automated scheduling system. The emergency ward generator had suffered a minor malfunction, and all non-essential staff were ordered to stand down until morning. I turned the car around. When I arrived back at Oak Ridge, the estate was dark. The grand house sat like a black monolith against the storm-swept sky. I parked my SUV far down the gravel driveway, extinguishing the headlights. I walked through the torrential rain, my combat boots making no sound on the wet grass. I unlocked the side door using my physical key, avoiding the electronic keypad, which would chime in the master bedroom. The air inside was cold. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked with a heavy, ominous rhythm. As I stepped into the shadows of the grand foyer, I saw a small figure sitting on the bottom step of the staircase. It was my 5-year-old daughter, Lily. She was wearing her favorite flannel pajamas, her tiny arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her small shoulders were shaking, her face pale in the dim moonlight filtering through the stained glass windows. She was clutching a bruised, old teddy bear. My heart shattered. I dropped to one knee, my medic training immediately taking over. I checked her pulse, scanned her tiny body for any physical harm, my breathing shallow. "Lily," I whispered, my voice a soft, soothing hum. "Sweetheart, why are you down here in the dark? Where is your nanny?" Lily looked up at me, her big blue eyes filled with a terror that no 5-year-old should ever possess. She reached out, her small, cold hand grasping my wet sleeve. Her voice was nothing more than a trembling breath. "Mom," she whispered, her lips quivering. "Don't go upstairs. Please, don't go upstairs." "Why, baby, what's upstairs?" I asked, my blood turning to ice. "They're talking about you," Lily whimpered, burying her face in my shoulder. "Daddy and Aunt Victoria. They said they're going to put you in a bad place, where you can't come back. And they said Nana is going to sleep forever soon." "I'm scared, Mom." They looked so mean. A cold, lethal calm washed over me. It was the exact same feeling I got when a casualty was brought into the trauma bay with multiple arterial bleeds. The chaos of the world faded, leaving only a razor-sharp focus. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore. It was existential. It was a direct threat to my child, my grandmother, and my life. "Stay here, Lily. Under the stairs, in the cubby. Hide behind the coats. Do not make a sound." "Can you do that for Mommy?" I whispered. She nodded bravely, crawling into the small storage space beneath the grand staircase. I stood up, I took off my wet jacket, leaving me in my dark tactical undergarments. I climbed the stairs. In the military, we are taught to walk on the outer edges of the steps where the wood is reinforced and doesn't creak. Was a ghost ascending into my own home. As I reached the second-floor landing, the smell of cheap jasmine perfume hit my nostrils, stronger and more sickening than ever. It was coming from the master study, the room that had been my father's sanctuary. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm yellow light cutting through the darkness of the hallway. I crept closer, pressing my back against the cold wainscoting. "It has to look like an accident, Richard," a woman's voice whispered. It was Victoria. But her voice lacked its usual whiny, helpless tone. It was sharp, venomous, and dripping with greed. "The doctor said her heart is already weak. If we double the dosage of her digitalis, she'll slip away in her sleep. No one questions a second stroke in an 80-year-old woman." And Evelyn Richards' voice replied. I heard the clink of a crystal decanter, the sound of amber liquid splashing into a glass. "She's a medical professional, Victoria. If she suspects anything, she'll order an autopsy." "Evelyn won't be in a position to order anything," my stepmother Eleanor's voice chimed in from the depths of the room. "The papers are already drawn up. Dr. Sterling is a close friend of mine. For a modest donation to his clinic, he's prepared to sign the involuntary psychiatric hold. We have 18 months of documentation showing her erratic behavior, her outbursts, her combat trauma. Once she's locked away in the sanitarium, we declare her unfit to take full control of the Vance estate, the trust fund, and the Gold Star Foundation. You'll be the sole guardian of Lily." "And the money?" Richard asked, a breathless, eager note in his voice. "The foundation accounts are already routed through the shell company in the Caymans." Victoria laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. $5 million, Richard. All we need is Evelyn's signature on the joint asset release form, or her signature on the psychiatric waiver. Once she's committed, you, as her guardian, can sign them yourself." I felt a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline. It felt like someone had severed an artery deep inside my chest. The betrayal was complete, surgical, and absolute. My husband, my stepmother, my stepsister, all plotting to murder my grandmother, steal my father's legacy, rob the families of fallen soldiers, and lock me away in a mental institution while stealing my daughter. I reached slowly into my pocket. My hand found my smartphone. With practiced, silent movements, I activated the high-definition video recorder. I carefully positioned the camera lens through the gap in the door hinge. The glow of my phone screen illuminated the darkroom where I stood in the hallway, casting a faint blue light over my tense features. On the screen, I captured it all. Richard was sitting at my father's desk, holding a forged power of attorney document. Victoria was sitting on his lap, her arms wrapped around his neck, wearing my mother's vintage diamond tennis bracelet. Eleanor stood near the liquor cabinet, holding a small brown glass vial, the digitalis meant for Nana Beatrice. "We do it at the charity gala next weekend," Eleanor said, her eyes gleaming with malice. "With all the military brass and local politicians there, Evelyn will be under immense pressure. We show them her episode. We have her taken away in front of everyone. It will look like a tragic breakdown of a broken soldier. Nobody will suspect a thing." "To our future," Richard said, raising his glass. Victoria leaned in and kissed him, a long, passionate kiss that sealed their fate. I stopped the recording. I saved the file to a secure, military-grade cloud server encrypted with my tactical clearance codes. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. My mind was clear. Morality died the moment they targeted my daughter and my grandmother. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a combat operation. And in combat, you do not let the enemy know you have found their position until you are ready to fire. I quietly slipped back down the stairs, retrieved Lily from her hiding spot, and carried her out into the rain. I placed her in the back of my SUV, buckling her insecurely. "Where are we going?" Mommy Lily asked, her voice small. "We're going to visit an old friend, sweetie," I said, putting the car in drive. "And then, we're going to fix everything."